So this is a pretty Mickey Mouse setup. I told you that before we started when we looked at the last setup. I'm going to go ahead, I'll take you down here and show you what I've got set up, and then I think I'm going to go eat lunch, and then we'll come back and see what we can accomplish actually here. So let's go down here and take a look at this setup. All right, so here's my gearing. This is our little sprocket that we had to make for this. And this is a setup now. I've taken some time, and quite a bit of time actually, and just aligned everything, clamped it down to the table, and I think we've got it pretty good. Let me just run this just a little bit so you can see the mechanism in operation there. So this is what we end up with. And I'm going to kind of babysit this feed system as I feed this down, just because I don't want it to jump off the chain. I've just clamped in a little piece of UHMW here to hold this, hold a little alignment on this part of the chain, and we'll watch this one. I don't really have any place to clamp a little guide block on the back like I've got here. But anyway, that's the way we've got that set up, and let's go over and take a look at the rest of it here. I've got it within about 2/1000ths side to side here, and elevation up and down, and I'm going to be happy with that, because this little Mickey Mouse setup here is, you know, was welded up together years and years ago. Anyway, got a drive dog on here. This spiral was done with a felt pen, and I just set it up and let it run and made sure my chain stayed on. That's why I've got a little jump off here, is we had a chain want to come loose, so lost a little bit of felt pen mark. I went back and repositioned it. I can regain positioning on it as long as I don't get too excited. So I think I'm going to go in, eat lunch. We'll come back. This is going to be a slow process. I'm going to take very light cuts, especially the first couple of cuts, just to see how it's going to behave, and we'll see if we can't get a spiral cut here. All right, guys. Well, there's the first pass down, and I was really tentative with this, and I got to make a couple of adjustments. I don't know if I'd said I've got my little Noga Cool up here. We're using Qualichem 351, 251, 351, whatever it is, as a lubricant. This was actually just kind of a scratch pass more than anything else, and I'm being real conservative with this. I don't want to lose steps. I'm having to babysit the gear train because I don't want to derail my chain. But it's probably going to take about, I'm guessing, another 3, maybe 4 passes to get down to an acceptable depth. We're 3/16 wide. We're using Lakeshore Carbide 3/16 end mill on it. Let me blow it off here a little bit and see what it. Couple of adjustments I'm going to have to make. I notice with my drive dog here, I've got just a little bit of play, and once it gets down to this bottom position where there's the weight's down on the bottom, it wants to chatter a little bit, so I've got to clamp it in position. Otherwise, everything looks pretty good. I'm really happy with that if I can get that to cut all the way down the way it's supposed to. We're going to have a real nice concentric spiral all the way down. I'm really happy with that. It takes just about a half an hour per pass at this feed rate, and like I say, I'm being really conservative with it. I'd rather take my time. I'm not making real good chips. We're making more of a powder than, or little bitty chips type of thing. But the reality is, if I can make it through this with one carbide end mill without breaking it or doing anything stupid, losing position or anything like that, why, I just as soon burn up that $12 end mill and not worry about it for what we've got at stake here. But otherwise, I've got to run this back to traverse it back across and start here, because otherwise we've got backlash. We'd never match up. So I'm going to make a couple of adjustments. Like I say, I'm gonna clamp our dog a little more securely, and we'll back it up. I'm going to make a couple more cuts. I probably won't do that on camera. I'll bring you back for, the final pass or the last little bit of the final pass. I'll fast forward you through this previous one that we just did, because that's, you don't want to sit through a half an hour and watch that. The only time that's worth watching is if I crash it along the way. All right, well, I'm going to call this pretty much done for here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead, pull this setup down. I got to clean the table off and everything. I've got a few little burrs and things here. I'm going to take it over to the lathe and just deburr it there. I can slowly turn it and knock the little burrs off the edge there and clean that up a little bit. Clean up the table. I still got to mill my vertical slot there. I'm going to do that I'm going to mount my two vices onto the mill table and index it. This is here, it's level and everything, but it's not as secure as it could be. Plus, I think it's a little bit easier for me to deburr these edges without that slot in there. So I think that's the easiest and best way to do that. So things that are right and things that are wrong. If I was setting this up again, knowing what I know now, and I'll put a few still shots of the end down here before I break it down. You can see I've got a long bar clamp here on the back. That was just to add a little more pressure. I think I'd greased both ends, but after it's run through, 8 or 10 times at that rate, that slow rate of speed and everything, I think it got just a little bit loose, and I started getting a little bit of chatter on about the next to the last cut, and I thought it might have been this loosening up. I think what it actually was is my cutter was just getting dull and not wanting to do what it was supposed to be doing. So when I did my original little sprocket setup, being the master machinist that I wasn't, why evidently my sprocket, the one sprocket is not perfectly centered up, so consequently I had a tight, loose spot. So I had to babysit this while it was cutting. The ideal thing would have been start it, walk away, and forget it, because I think the last pass, and I was running it pretty slow, it took about 40 minutes to cut it. But there again, I didn't want to break anything, didn't want a chain to derail or anything like that. This one sprocket here, and there again, I'll show one more end view of it, even though you've already seen it. It was a little bit out of round, not as concentric as it could be with the shaft. I mean, the sprocket was round, but it was off-centered a little bit. So consequently, it wanted to run that chain in a little bit of an oval, so I had tight spots and loose spots, and after beating around for 20 years, being just a little bit bent up still, why it occasionally wanted to derail when I first got it going. I had 2 instances when I had to stop and make sure I didn't lose positioning or anything like that, and get the chain back situated again. After that, I got it kind of situated in, and it seemed to run real good and wanted to stay on, but I didn't quite trust it. So I sat here and babysitted it. To this point, I think I probably with setup and everything, I probably got about 7 hours in the whole thing. It was pretty fiddly to get set up. If I was building one for myself, the things I would do is just make sure your sprockets are concentric with your hub, or with your spindle that you're going to run them on, so you don't have that problem, and make sure they're straight. Other than that, I would do some sort of a setup where I just ran some cold roll with a point on it that's a dead center on the tailstock end. I would do something to where I could put a live center in there, just to kind of do away with that. So it's kind of a Mickey Mouse setup, but it's worked real well for this. Other than being a little fiddly, I'm very, very happy with that. That's going to make a real good vertical spiral on there. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and break this down, and I'll go ahead and deburr it. All right, well, there it is. Now, is it perfect? Nope. Is it acceptable and going to do a really good job for me? Yeah, it will. So, several things about it that, you know, could have been better. I got a little bit of chatter marks up in the top, which once it's fitted up won't make a bit of difference. Went through a couple of carbide cutters, you know, but other than that, why, that came out really, really well. I'm really happy with that. So hopefully you found that a little bit interesting, useful. Shows kind of how you can make something out of junk. But yeah, I'm really happy with that. Ends up with about 3/4 turns per inch is just about where we end up at. And actually this is down in the main casting a little bit when we get it mounted. But 3/16 wide, made it just under 1/8 of an inch, you know, deep, which is plenty. I think they call for 3/32 on the original size Quorn. And in reality, you don't need any more than that on this bigger one. You know, I gave it a little more depth than that, just to give it a little bit more support. But otherwise, there's some deburring to do on it yet. I'll smooth these edges up a little bit. But we have a perfectly acceptable spiral on our column. All told, I probably got about 7 hours in it, set up, you know, setting up the jigs, tooling, the whole 9 yards. So, and I already had the little fixture, the little Mickey Mouse fixture to turn this. So all in all, I'm really happy with that. That will serve me well. So the next thing will probably be figuring out exactly what length I want the bars, the bed bars to be, and how I'm going to mount them. I'm contemplating using a low friction bushing of some sort in the front bar, just to slide back and forth. The back one's fixed permanently, but I'm contemplating that, you know, just to give it a little more frictionless. I'd said originally I wasn't going to use split cotters on it. I may have changed my mind. I may do at least part of them with split cotters. We'll see how it plays out and what I've got for space and how I think it's best going to work. You know, so anyway, hopefully you find it useful. Comments, suggestions, leave them in the comment section for me below. If you haven't hit that subscribe button and you find this useful, I'd appreciate it. Hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. And as always, guys, thanks for taking the time to watch.